Things are now clear that the National Assembly will outrightly reject the newly gazetted election regulations and campaign financing proposals presented by the electoral body IEBC. Members of Parliament are unhappy over the proposals by IEBC, terming them time-barred. The Committee on Delegated Legislation held a session with IEBC commissioners led by their chairman, Wafula Chebukati, where they told IEBC it was unlawful for them to gazette the regulations without seeking the approval of Parliament as required. IEBC, on its part, has accused Parliament of failing to table campaign financing bill presented to them in August 2020, as Duncan Haimba reports.
Monday's move by IEBC to gazette campaign spending limits seems to have rattled lawmakers. And when IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati appeared before MPs, they were ready to pounce.
You went ahead to spend public money to make gazettements without approval.
At no time did the Commission want to paint Parliament in bad light.
The Commission was put on the spot why they sat on regulations prepared in 2016, only to present them in the end of July 2021.
Already, these regulations are ultra-vires from the beginning, as in they are outside Section 5, and there is no even point of debating them, because from the beginning, they are faulty.
The regulations before us read 2020. The lapse of 4 years is substantive. Would you want to imagine that nothing has changed in terms of the politics, in terms of the financing arrangement and the rest since 2016?
I have alluded to some of the challenges and the delays that were occasioned as we attempted to amend the Act.
The committee kept on pushing IEBC to a corner, accusing them of sleeping on their job.
These regulations are actually what was there before 2017. You only change the dates. So why take 4 years just to do that?
As a commission, we sat down, prepared the amendments, submitted those amendments to Parliament on 21st of August 2020. And we've been following up this. It's unfortunate that up to now they have not been tabled before the House or acted upon. And we were hoping that if this were then acted upon, then the new regulations would come up, or we would develop now regulations upon passage of the amendments. Considering that this did not happen, then the Commission had to take a step to remind Parliament, this committee, that then we need now to operationalize the regulations.
You've actually brought the regulations of 2016, and we are now in 2021. So all along you want to paint Parliament as bad, while the delays on your side and the errors on your side.
We don't think we gazetted the limits and procedurally, but even then, should regulations then be passed with different parameters, nothing stops the Commission from varying the limits and regazetting by way of corrigenda or otherwise.
Eventually, IEBC was outnumbered, cornered, subdued, and twisted into submission.
For example, the Gazette notice we have published can be amended any time, so that then it should not be an issue.
Gazetting without coming to Parliament for approval. Yeah. So now that we have agreed that we are null, could I have a proposer and a seconder?
Decision by National Assembly's Committee on Delegated Legislation to discard proposals by IEBC on campaign spending. It means effectively that it will be an open field for candidates and political parties when it comes to the financing of the 2022 general election. Duncan Haimba, KTN News from Parliament.
The decision by the Delegated Legislation Committee to do away with the IEBC proposals on election funding that had generated heat has been welcomed by different political players. Now, many had termed the proposals as punitive and ill-timed. Alan Uchanda has more.
Well, the Committee on Delegated Legislation, of course, under the stewardship of Tiati Member of Parliament William Kamket, has trashed the proposals by the IEBC to have the election funding capping on various positions being sought by different persons. And so we are here to actually just talk to the leader of majority in the County Assembly of Meru, who is also the chairman of the leaders of county assemblies caucus in all the 47 county assemblies, of course, countrywide, Mr. Victor Mutuma, to just shed light on that because Mheshimiwa, we saw the IEBC had proposed that all the positions are being sought, of course, the political positions being sought will have some fund capping, of course, so that those who are seeking those positions cannot spend beyond those cappings. But remember that the members of parliament had actually read mischief given the timing of the proposals. Maybe from your part, from your end here as the members of county assemblies, do you welcome the trashing by the National Assembly, or you are for the proposals by the IEBC?
Now, I must admit that this is one of those times that we in agreement with the National Assembly. We also read, quite some mischief on the timing of this proposal. And we also a bit concerned about, even the implication to the voters. For instance, when you talk about capping, the MCA seat to 20 million, what does that do to the Mwananchi? Are we not creating the impression that for one to get to a member of county assembly position, you need to be a multimillionaire? What happened to the, to the need to have leaders elected not on the basis of the amounts of money they have, but on the basis of their leadership skills and, what they can deliver to people? So we are calling upon IEBC to think through this again, present whatever proposals that they ought to present, which are not, which are a little more realistic, because it is completely unacceptable that we can even imagine that somebody who wants to become a member of county assembly, can spend anything even close to 10 million. I mean, when we're talking about capping it at 20 million, it is clear that probably they mean the average should be 10 million. And in our view, we need to create opportunities for young leaders and people who have not even necessarily been in jobs elsewhere, people who have not been earning, some huge salaries. And therefore, my appeal is for this nation, what we need is credible leadership across the country, and not, laws that seem to indicate that leadership is a club for the elites, for the rich men and women in this country.
Maybe we're also seeing the members of parliament saying that they are reading mischief, given the timing of the proposals by the IEBC. Do you also, from your end, read mischief? Maybe the IEBC was mischievous in presenting the proposals?
What I also what we also fail to understand about all this timing is not only this proposal that has been brought forward, we also told that IEBC has not yet received the funding that they ought to receive for it to be able to execute the mandate that they ought to execute. And if we continue with this trend, chances are that even if money is made available to IEBC, say a few weeks to elections or a few months to the elections, then we are likely to see what happened in 2013 and in the previous elections happening, where IEBC comes together very hurriedly with half-baked decisions and, without properly having to do proper procurement of services and whatever else is needed. So we are calling upon the National Treasury, we are calling upon everybody who is concerned to take matters election very seriously. The Kenyans are expectant. They really want to see a very peaceful electioneering year. We're already into it. And it is wrong for us, for our whole government, to wait and rush this process when we knew we would have an election in 5 years' time, because it is very clear in our constitution.
Maybe one final one. One will argue that maybe, you know, the MCAs, we know your salaries, but one will argue that we have individuals who have actually acquired and amassed wealth quite in dubious ways. And so one will wonder that maybe an MCA aspirant is actually pouring more than 20 million to actually pursue a seat that is going to earn less than 300,000. And so sorry for that. Maybe they actually IEBC could be justified to just come and have and actually, of course, put there the upper ceiling for your spending. Actually, just arguing that maybe curbing corruption when it comes to politics.
One thing that ought to be explained to the Kenyans is even coming up with the ceiling of 20 million for members of a county assembly, 100 million for MPs and 120 for women rep, there needs to be some sort of justification. We don't understand why somebody who is earning 150,000, like the cases of MCAs, minus some of the other allowances, would need to spend such a colossal amount of money. So, in my view, we need to have a way of discouraging the common mwananchi, the electorates from imagining that somebody who doesn't spend millions of money cannot be elected, because that is the impression that has already been created. And we need to revise that. We need to have civic education. We need to have a formula of making sure that even anybody who doesn't have a coin, as long as they have the basic qualifications and have no money, they ought to be elected. Really, yes.
Thanks so much. That's Victor Kareide Mutuma, the chairman of the Leaders of Majority Caucus in the country, just actually making known his sentiments about the storm that was triggered by the IEBC after it proposed the election funding rules. But remember that the very constitution that is actually guiding the whole process is the constitution that has actually mandated the IEBC to set the election, capping, of course, the rules. But in so doing, it has actually to present their proposal to the delegated legislation committee under the chairmanship of TRT Member of Parliament William Kamket, to have the committee actually carry out the sensitization process and also the public hearing, and of course then so that later on the IEBC can now gazette the rules, of course, the capping rules. But as it is now, the committee in the National Assembly has already trashed the proposal by the IEBC, and so the initial rules, of course, stand. And so, but remember that we've had stakeholders arguing that we may be having a situation where aspirants or those who are actually pursuing political seats will be now sanitizing their ill-gotten wealth in their pursuit for political seats.
We are still staying with that story, and now we want to talk to Dennis Nthumbi, who is a political analyst joining us via phone. Good morning, Dennis, and thank you for joining us here on News Center. Picking up from where Alan Ochanda has just left, the fact that the National Assembly Delegated Committee has proposed to annul the draft election campaign, financing regulation of 2021. They did say that the IEBC published these regulations in order to paint Parliament in bad picture. From where you sit, is it malice or it was just a technicality?
Thank you very much, Ashley, and good morning.
Good morning.
I think the Constitution provides for a time threshold IBC that IBC should be able to provide these guidelines. When you look at Section 5 of the Election Campaign Financing Act 2013, it mandates IBC to table this Parliament at least 12 months before the general election. And therefore, IBC is supposed to table it 9th of August. It's supposed to be passed, ratified by Parliament, but by the 9th of August. And so you see it technically. IBC, the Campaign Finance Regulation 2020 must have been passed before the 9th of August 2021. That's what I'm saying. And therefore, those tappings are time barred. And IBC will not be able to publish the 3 months general election. So it means it's going to be a free-flowing environment for campaign funding thereabouts.
Right, and that's the question that everyone has been asking, the fact that, you know what, so what next? Time is not on the side. Will we be able to achieve this in the next 1 year?
So it means that matter we have to move on swiftly. Really, there's nothing legally that IBC or Parliament can do because the Constitution provides a right for a timeline. And so therefore, it will be the prerogative of the political party and the candidate to try and, because actually the reason why public funding, public either direct or indirect funding must be capped and regulated.
All right, Dennis, we seem to be having a challenge hearing you clearly. I don't know if I'm on loudspeaker. Maybe you could just turn that off.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, so what I was saying, Ashley, is that now it's going to be a free flow. The candidates and the political parties then must ensure that according to the guidelines provided by the Constitution, because the reason why political funding is capped both on candidates and political parties is to, number one, provide for a level playing ground. A level playing ground whereby those ones who don't have access to all this money will not feel alienated, but also on the question of gender parity, at the end of the day, and also to curb corruption. But we also have to appreciate that funding is a democratic expression by the electorate, especially in countries where it is the electorate that funds through crowdfunding and through other approaches. And therefore, we don't know why IBC would sit on this so long, and yet they are aware of the time thresholds that the Constitution provides for, and the fact that this needed to be debated by Parliament. This needed to be subjected to public participation thresholds by Parliament itself. So it's not something that it's not a term paper that you bring to Parliament and they pass it and you congratulate them. It's a rigorous process that Parliament must undertake, and they must involve the public thereabout. Even IBC itself is mandated to ensure that the public is involved and they ratify this, because there are articles that do not allow Parliament to discuss a matter unless that matter has been approved and discussed by the people. So unfortunately, this provides for certain loopholes, and it provides for an environment that is not going to provide for equity or equality, or perhaps even democracy will be subjugated, where you have tons and tons of money that is unregulated within the hands of political parties and within the hands of candidates.
If you look at the numbers, do you think of course you've mentioned that this gives room for unfair level of playing field with the candidates, of course, but then what does that say about our democracy in general?
The execution of democracy, number one, is in the hands of the people. Number two is delegated to the hands of the institutions. So when these institutions go to bed and they sleep too much in 1 year to the elections, and they're aware of the thresholds that the Constitution has provided, really, then we must put them to task, because we are left sort of with a laissez-faire approach where we can't control much. And unfortunately, Ashley, my concern is that we have a government that is behaving as though it is subject to electoral defeat. We have a government that is collecting and rallying everyone to compete against someone. And they should behave like the Kibaki government, where they are more concerned of handover. They are more concerned of how power will be transferred from one to the other, which the legal term for that is transition, rather than creating unfair competition at the end of the day. So we are left in the trenches wondering, and actually money is a key thing in Kenya, and that's the reason why certain regulations were put in place by Wanjiku. Also, chaos and issues around insecurity are also funded and thereabout. So we must trace and track every coin, and we must make sure that the political parties and the candidates are accountable as to how they are using their money. But unfortunately, we seem once again, whether it is an act of IBC to deliberately collude with those who steal democracy in this country, we wonder how did they miss meeting a glaring billboard of a time threshold that they did meet. But I've also seen that the other key issue that IBC says we are not fully funded. We had asked for 40 billion. Parliament is ratifying half of that. And also the government moving and procedurally to take away development partners like the UNDP that have been funding IBC and telling UNDP we might not require your money, but we will also not give the full money that is required. So not only are we left in the trenches wondering how will money be spent, but also we're in a quagmire where IBC says we don't have adequate money at all, and our development partners have been told that their money may not be required through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Okay, so then as of now, the whole matter is in limbo because we are aware that the committee is now expected to write a report on the regulations. So should Kenyans just stay and wait and see what happens next?
I think we have several other arms that this matter can be adjudicated upon. And Kenyans now need to look at the judiciary to perhaps in the interest of ratifying a few others. Maybe Parliament will be able to help, but Parliament also seems to be, instead of giving us a solution, they seem to be complicating the matter further. But we cannot go into an election that we seem to have weak institutions that are unable to meet critical deadlines. The institutions also don't seem to have adequate money. And we have contesting powers that are sitting and others are transitioning and XYZ. The environment in 2022 is extremely important that we capture and we captivate it now, and we are firmly on the driver's seat. I think we have to exhaust every instrument in our constitution to make sure that in the next 3 months we line up the election in August. In August, as it's supposed to be, as defined in the Constitution.
All right. Thank you very much, Dennis Nthumbi, for that. Dennis Nthumbi, a political analyst there, just giving us more perspective to this conversation that is expected to develop as days continue. Well, moving on to actually education issues, secondary school head teachers who are yet to implement